So welcome everyone, thank you for coming. I have put together a presentation that focuses on some of the best practices that we can use for our English language learners. And I'll share a little bit about myself before I start. I am a graduate of SUNY Oneonta, so I took classes in college with Alejandra and Maria from 2010 to 2015. And after graduation, I moved to Southern California and I pursued a teaching certificate there. And while I was there in this program, they focus on general education classroom teachers being the providers of ELL instruction for students. They are very concerned about English language learners being in the general education classroom getting services with their peers. So while I did this master's program in California, I worked on my enhancing and bettering my ELL instruction. So one of the things that I think is so important is even if you are not in New York State, an ELL teacher, being able to provide services to your students in your classroom. So I'm not sure where everyone is working and what positions we're in, or if we're interested in being English as a new language teachers, but I just think that a lot of the strategies that I've put together in this presentation can work for all teachers and for all students. So before we get started, I just would like for all of you to think about what makes up the whole child. We always talk about the whole child. What experiences, what influences, and what other factors go into knowing about the whole child? Yeah, so I agree. The socioeconomic class, basic needs, shelter, food, and safety is huge. Heritage and culture is another part of the child that I think is very important. And their parents, yep, responsibilities, family support, literacy level. So these past experiences, these are all things that we need to consider when teaching any student, but specifically with English language learners. Many of them are coming from a country that is not this country and a culture that is different from American culture. And when we want to be able to reach these students, personal connection is going to be key. So I'm going to share my screen again. So literacy can be defined in three parts: as biographical, which means it is what the student experiences, their culture, their language, their academic experiences, and cognition make up a student's biography. It is also fundamental. Listening, speaking, reading, and writing are the fundamentals of literacy. And then the research-based practices that go along with literacy are phonemic awareness, phonics, vocabulary, comprehension, and fluency. Using all three of these components to teach are going to benefit English language learners and English only students. These are the components of any type of literacy, but knowing specifically more about our ELL students or English language learners, these things can be impacted. So why do ELL teachers need to know the components of literacy? So this is important because as a teacher, you will need to make sure that you're addressing these components in all of your instruction. These components play a part in complete literacy instruction, and it will benefit all of our students. So this is the interactive reading process model. At the center, we have the reader. There were previous models prior to this one called bottom-up instruction and then top-down instruction, which focus on one step at a time and teaching these things in sequence. But we have learned through research that some students are able to master one component before the next, and it's important to include all of them in a circular model. So having students learn letter recognition and phonemic analysis, as well as word identification, syntactic analysis, discourse level analysis, and schema level analysis allow the student to have a better it provides a better instructional model because students are not stuck at one level before they can interact with the next. Students gain valuable learning experiences from each of these different components. And if we don't teach them all in conjunction, students will have holes and they'll have things missing. So some patterns to consider for English language learners are instructional patterns, questioning patterns, and response time patterns. So instructional patterns that are very typical in the United States are critical thinking and problem solving. We expect students to question, to use critical thinking and to problem solve on their own. Some cultures will not value these instructional practices of critical thinking and questioning, and some students will want to be told what to do and how to follow the process steps. So that can be a process where, as the instructor, you must get to know your students and their different levels, as well as, and their different cultures, there are different cultures, and using explicit instruction to model how you expect your students to learn will help bridge the gaps between the different cultures of your students in terms of instructional patterns. For questioning patterns, most teachers will reward active student participation. Many cultures do not reward active student participation. Some conflicts that can occur are some cultures view teachers as authority figures not to be questioned. Some cultures view questioning and as a source of embarrassment. If you do not know the answer, you are not going to question it. And so these are other things to consider. And response time patterns, it's always important to take wait time. I think that as teachers, we all know that some students can respond quicker than others, and some cultures value more think and wait time, and those students will be punished for taking that thinking and waiting time. So, like I said, in my experiences, strategies that benefit English language learners will also benefit English only learners or English only students. Throughout my experiences, I at first thought it was going to be really challenging to support my English language learners and my English only students. But as I learned more about the strategies that I can use, I learned that the strategies that I use for my English language learners support my English only students. And it just makes for better instructional practices. So some of the strategies, the types of strategies that we can use are strategies geared towards our objectives and standards. When we plan our lessons, how can we plan our experiences with supports for our ELLs? Learning strategies, what cognitive and social strategies can help our ELLs? Activating background knowledge, how can you guide ELLs to make connections to what they already know? And this goes back to making connections with your students. Presenting new material, how do your words and actions impact your ELLs in the classroom? Checking comprehension, how can I gain insight into what my students have learned? And extending through vocabulary, how does teaching vocabulary support my ELLs? So for objectives and standards, I chose 3 strategies that I think are very beneficial to use. Choosing interesting, challenging, and practical topics are all very important, again, for all students, but specifically for English language learners. To choose interesting topics, one of my practices that I use is an interest inventory. I give my students at the beginning and again in the middle of the year just a quick survey of questions. What topics are you interested in? What times of day do you feel more motivated to learn? What subjects interest you? What subjects do not interest you? What ways do you like to learn individually, in a small group, in a whole group? By getting to know your students through an interest inventory, you gain valuable insight into what is going to intrinsically motivate them to learn. In terms of challenging topics, when you have students with different levels of English, your material, your content should always stay rigorous, and you can modify the language used for your students. So depending on what level of English they have, you can still choose challenging and rigorous topics. And then choosing topics that can be easily chunked and scaffolded for your English language learners is also key. Some learning strategies that are important to think about are metacognitive learning strategies, thinking about learning. So teaching your students how to plan, how to take notes, use organizers, and chunk their work into smaller tasks are all things that we already do for our English only students, but will greatly benefit our English language learners as well. Using cognitive learning strategies, making connections between new and old learning. And on the next slide, we'll talk more about activating prior knowledge and making connections between the native language and English. And then social learning strategies are group work, buddy reading, peer observations, asking questions, and making requests. Those are all things that go along with that interest inventory I mentioned before of using your students' interests and asking them how they prefer to work and what topics they prefer. Activating background knowledge. These are 3 of my favorite strategies to use with all students, but they can really benefit our English language learners as well. So using a brainstorm, having open-ended questions for students to generate ideas. I also like a type of brainstorm that I use with my students is a formulating questions technique where I present them with a new topic and I give them 30 to 60 seconds to write down as many questions as they have about the topic in front of them. And then we go through the questions and we categorize them into open-ended questions and closed questions. And we really look at these questions. And then as we get into the material, we go back and see which questions we were able to answer. And it's been a great tool for all of my students. And so I think, write, pair, share. I think many teachers use this strategy already, giving students 30 to 90 seconds to think and write down as many ideas as they can about a topic, what they already know, giving them a minute or 2 to pair with another student and share what they wrote, which gives them an opportunity to maybe add to or modify what they originally wrote and make sense of someone else's ideas as well as their own, and then 2 to 3 minutes to share with the whole class. Finally, a know, wondered, learned chart, KWL chart, or know, want to know, learned. What do I already know about a topic? What do I wonder about this topic? And what have I learned? So using this chart before the lesson, what do you already know? And then before teaching, what do I want to know or what do I wonder about this topic? And then after you're teaching, adding to it and asking students what they have learned. So in terms of presenting material, slowing down makes a huge difference for English language learners. And I can speak from experience as a new Spanish student when I was learning Spanish. Many of my teachers spoke just a little bit slower and took a little bit more pause time between phrases. And it really increases the ability to comprehend what is being said. Don't speak so unnaturally slow that it feels uncomfortable, but slowing your words down and taking some more pauses can make a big difference for our students. When I mentioned earlier using complex topics but differentiated text, this is one of those strategies of simplifying sentences. You can present a complex text and then break down those complex sentences and simplify the sentence structure for your students. This makes a big difference because some text is challenging for English only students as well. And presenting a complex sentence and then providing an alternative that is simpler and uses some more accessible vocabulary will help our students to understand. And finally, using familiar and consistent words. Pairing low frequency words that students don't hear all that often with consistent and familiar synonyms can help increase their vocabulary and give them access to words that they don't know. And then using the same words and phrases for directions and routines. One of the books that I use for the course that I teach has an example of 3 different ways to ask students to do the exact same thing with many different words and phrases thrown in there. And it makes you think about how we can say the same thing that has the same, something that has the same message with so many different words. Checking for comprehension. I have tried to require students to ask questions. Like I mentioned earlier, having them formulate those questions before a lesson. At the end of a lesson, having students ask 1 to 3 questions and including that as a normal part of your lesson will have students thinking about their learning more. Using wait time, again, allowing students that time before requesting a response. And then offering a pass. If a student is unsure, you can offer them a pass, but always make sure to hold them accountable. When they are not sure, you can go to another student, have them provide you an answer, and then go back to the first student and ask them the same question. And because they heard someone else give the answer, they should be able to answer it at that point. And finally, extending through vocabulary. Have students be a language detective. Give them an opportunity to find words in English and compare them to cognates, words that are very similar in their native language. Being aware of false cognates as well. Some words may look similar but have different meanings, and you can discuss that with your students as well. Having students create a personal dictionary gives them ownership of their language learning, allows them to choose which words to include and which words they want to learn, and gives them an opportunity to write their own definitions as well as using their native language to support. And finally, a word of the week is always a good practice. Choosing a vocabulary word or more than 1 word for the class to learn each week gives opportunity for all students to learn new vocabulary and provides our English language learners an opportunity for more vocabulary instruction. So I am going to share one last link in the chat. And this link is to an article for some helpful online resources for teaching ELLs. What I'd like for us to do is to read the article and then choose one resource that the article provides to explore. And then we're going to share in the chat, not on Jamboard, what we and what we felt that resource. So if you can just give me 1 second to get this link, I will share it in the chat. So when you open the link, I think we can give about 15 minutes to read the article and maybe explore 1 or 2 of the resources and then share what you've learned. I agree that the National Geographic YouTube looks really great. I have used them in the past to support with science and social studies topics. Yes, Melissa, I agree that there are a lot of songs out there. I've found some good lower elementary songs for math topics that really help my students. Scratch Garden is a great one. They've got some good songs on YouTube. I agree, Alejandra, Common Lit looks like a great resource for texts of all kinds. There looks like there's tons of different texts that you can use. Oh, I didn't even notice they're in Spanish too. Great. I think I flew through everything. Did anybody want to share anything else? I know that Alejandra is here to answer questions about the program and the courses. If there's any other questions or comments, we can keep typing in the chat, or you can turn your microphone on.
I have a middle school question. So my students are now one-on-one with Chromebooks, which in some cases is very helpful. Trying to get them to stop Googling things and copy and pasting in everything has become my biggest challenge this year, because they don't necessarily understand what they're copying and pasting, and I can't really assess their true learning and understanding. And it was not this bad before they were one-on-one with these Chromebooks. So if you heard anyone talking about this or having specific strategies, because they're so tech savvy, and that's really what it's come down to. Like, I know even second graders, like they can probably run circles around me in the tech world. So trying to get them to not rely on that so much, so that they are truly developing literacy and I can assess it a little more accurately.
I am having the same issue, Kelly, in my 5th grade classroom. My students are also one-on-one with devices. What I have been stressing to them is that when you are going to copy and paste someone else's words, that is a quotation. And if you would like to do that, you can put it in quotations. I'm trying not to, my students are, I have to tread very lightly with them. I'm not going to tell you that you cannot use someone else's words, but you have to tell the reader when you're doing that. And what kinds of programs, so you're saying that you can't tell when they're copying and pasting, and you're having.
I can tell.
Yeah, you can tell.
I can definitely tell. And a lot of times, like I'll copy it, throw it into the good old Google, and then I'll copy the link and throw it in there and be like, I see where you got this from, but like sometimes they're not even Googling the right thing. And it's not until after, I'm going through an assignment sometimes that I catch it. Like sometimes I can catch it when I'm walking around the room, but sometimes it's something that, they're doing later, they're working in a group setting with, and even their peers don't sometimes catch them copying and pasting the wrong things. And they laugh, like they kind of think it's funny sometimes. And I'm like, oh. Not really. But I do like the idea of it being, you can quote, but now you have to explain. Because if you can't explain, then maybe you didn't quote the right thing. Okay.
Yeah. That's the way that I've addressed it with my students, because I know that some of them, they do really struggle with writing and typing and using their own words. But again, getting them to put down into their own words, their understanding it's definitely a challenge. Erin, that is very true, but maybe not helpful.
I'm new to the Nearpod world, but I've been using it here and there with my social studies students, and it kind of locks their Chromebook screen. So if you have them join your Nearpod lesson using a live video link, only the slideshow slide that you have on the smartboard will show on their screen. They can't really get out of it. And there's a lot of interactive slides that you can do with them, where you pose a question, or you can, have them write vocabulary cards, and they kind of just have to write it from their own thoughts. So I'm wondering if that might help with the copying and pasting situation, because I don't think they can get over to Google when that slide is locked on Nearpod. But I'm new to the Nearpod world, so I'm not 100% on that.
Another program that not every district has, and I've had it before and I don't have it now, is Go Guardian, where you can see everything that every student is doing on their screens, and you can lock them on a specific window or a tab and they can't go anywhere else. And then you can have recording of what they've done.
We're getting that this fall,
Yeah.
apparently. And like, that's fine for every student, but I'm just I'm struggling on trying to get them to see the value in developing what they do know so that I can assist them more clearly with the parts that they're stuck.
Yeah.
So it's not just the technology piece. It's more like, how do I get them to say, okay, I'm proud of what I can give you. And now can you help me with the other part that I can't?
I love what you're saying, Kelly. I think you're 100% right. It is about learning for the sake of learning and not jumping through hoops and getting to some particular goal, right? When we try to get to a goal, that's when the cheating comes in and I have to be with everybody else. And we as teachers need to stand up and say, no, it is about the learning process, right? That Gold Guardian just kills me that we're spending money to monitor our children. I don't know if you paid attention, but Go Guardian got sued because in Chicago that was just turning on at random times, right? And yet we have 2D laws that are supposed to be protecting kids from trafficking, but we're gonna buy programs so that we can do this stuff, right? We have to stop the silliness and go back to the sake of learning is important because it's important, right? That's what I think, that's where I stand. Watch the video on Ken's skateboarding Save Our Schools. It's about Dr. Tay, and he talks about, look, when I'm learning a new skill, it's not always fun, number one, right? So we got to stop telling kids, oh, go to school and have fun. No, it's not always fun, but it's always rewarding when it comes from you, right? And that's the end goal, is that it's rewarding. And then he says that when learning is the goal, then cheating is not necessary. So he's doing skateboarding and he's doing these tricks and he's going, just think about it. If somebody comes up to me and says, can I copy your pop, whatever the name of the trick is? It's like, how can you copy that, right? Of course you can copy it. Watch me as much as you want. You copy what you can, right? But somehow, like in school, it's completely different, right? I think you are 100% right on target, Kelly. It didn't answer your question though, huh? No, but I do think like that emphasis, continually emphasizing that it's about your learning and your learning process. And, if you're struggling finding the right words, that's where I can come in and help you. But it's not about getting the assignment done. It's about learning and how do we help you get there?
Yeah. And like, I try to catch them every time I see the light bulb on their face, and like give as much positive praise as I can, just like, when I'm training my dog, right? The same thing. They do the thing that you want them to do. And you just keep, yes, 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 yes. And I feel like that is very helpful for any student. But it's definitely the like being able to Google thing that I think sometimes is hindering their deeper learning and understanding of things. And I'm at a loss.
And we need to convince kids that they should take a pause before they Google, right? What does logic dictate? Based on your knowledge and background understanding, what do you think the answer is? And we all need to do that, whether you're a child or whether we're a grown-up. Like we're all running and going, oh, let me Google this, but really you're not getting into deeper thinking and understanding, right? And it's no different for us than it is for the kids. We have to slow them down and then say, what's the purpose of this? And did you get it just because you Googled it? That's not really helping you, is it? Like, what is it that you're really trying to get to? Sorry, I get on a rant. I think we as teachers understand that though, Kelly, and I'm so glad to hear you say that. And I just keep pushing and saying teachers understand the fundamentals of learning, and we've been told that we don't. Can they pass the exam and can they hit all these different objectives? No, it's can we incorporate their curiosity into what we're doing and nurture their interest in asking questions. So I don't know if there's other questions. I don't want to cut anybody off. I love engaging in conversation like that. I'm so glad you brought that up, Kelly. But while we're thinking of other questions, Alejandra or Sue, do you want to talk a little bit about the pathway program that you guys have?
Sure. Yeah, I can start with that, and maybe if Sue or Shweshwe have any additional information that they want to add to my description, sure, just jump right in. So our bilingual education certification is a 15 credit certification program. So it's an extension to a previous certification. So it's not a master's degree, but it's a 5-course, 15 credit certification extension on bilingual education that will aid anyone in helping and teaching, supporting any English language learner that you might have in your classroom or around you. So So first, I'm going to talk to you a little bit about what the program is about, what it contains, and then if you're interested, how it would work, because there is some financial support from the Department of Education, which is something that's going to be very appealing. Again, as I mentioned, it consists of 5 courses. The first one, actually the first 2 that are starting this summer, we're teaching them this summer, 2 courses. One is linguistics for foreign language education. That's the course I teach. And it has to do with all the linguistic background that any teacher of foreign languages or as a new language need to know. The second course taking place this summer is Principles of Bilingualism and Second Language Acquisition and Literacy. And that is the course that Maria teaches. And both of them are taking place this summer, and it's very conveniently scheduled. So it's after school is out. So we have planned it that way on purpose because we know how teachers are super busy, and we were talking in our committee yesterday in our group saying that teachers are pretty much teachers/magicians with everything that you guys are doing. So yes. So the courses this summer are going to take place from June 12th until August the 3rd. So it's 7 weeks. Then there are 2 more courses that are going to be offered in the fall as part of the certification. One of them is Issues in Diversity, Multilingual Education, and Bilingualism. And that is the course that Suryati Awas teaches. And the other one is Methods of Teaching and Assessing Course Subject Areas. And that is the course that Shweshwe Yang is teaching also in the fall. So there are 2 courses this summer, 2 courses in the fall, and then the last course, which is Advanced Research Theories and Best Practices. So the methodology course for teaching English as a second language or as a new language will take place in the spring. So it's 2 courses in the summer, 2 in the fall, and 1 in the spring. So some additional information that you should know about, eligibility for this program is that there are 3 main requirements. One of them is that applicants need to be certified already to teach in the state of New York, any subject, any discipline, but New York State certified. That's a very important requirement. Another one is that applicants need to have a teaching position. So they need to be working somewhere in the K through 12 system. And the other requirement is that applicants need to have at least 12 hours of a foreign language, any foreign language, or if that's not possible, if that's or hard to prove, there is an exam that can be taken, and applicants need to score at the intermediate mid level. Again, it could be in any foreign language. So the state of the Department of Education has agreed to cover 85% of the tuition cost for the program as long as students complete the program, the 5 courses, within a year. So as I mentioned, 2 courses this summer, 2 in the fall, and 1 in the spring. And there is a 50-hour required field work that is going to be divided between the courses in the fall, the 2 courses in the fall and the 1 in the spring. So I know the spring semester is going to be a little lighter because it's a single course. So we can definitely give more emphasis to the 50-hour observation and field work time at that time. So I believe I just explained everything that has to do, the 5-minute elevator speech about our bilingual certification program. I don't know if Dr. Abbas or Dr. Yang have anything to add to that. Again, Dr. Abbas teaches the course on diversity and bilingualism, and Dr. Yang will talk about, or will teach the class on research and advanced research theories and best practices, so the assessment class. And then the spring course will be on methods, on methodology, and how to teach English language learners. And it's yet to be decided who's going to be teaching that class.
Yeah, I think you've covered everything. So yeah, we look forward to receiving applications, and please spread the word to teachers.
Yes, talk to your districts. Perhaps your district has a little cash under the mattress, and they say, since you're responsible for the other 15% of the tuition, we can help you a little bit with that. And that is something that we have heard from a couple of applicants. The Department of Education covers the 85%, and their school district is going to cover a little bit extra. So if you can convey that to your district, and if they're interested in that, maybe you can negotiate something with them. That would be fantastic.
I have a question for, I guess, mostly for Kmberly. I had the last place that I worked, a lot of students who their native language was something that was non-Spanish. It was either Korean or Japanese, Chinese, and Vietnamese. And is there a difference? Because I sensed that there was, in the way if you have the basic tools of trying to get kind of the approach, kind of an immersive approach where they're listening and they're looking at things. It's got to be more difficult as a teacher than if you like Spanish or Italian or things like that. It was hard to deal with, because most of the students were sitting there, and it was funny, I would get assignments online where they were completely translated. Their language came through. Something happened in the connection, and their language came through rather than it translating into English. So, is there to adapt it? I don't know if anyone else has that issue. Is it more difficult, and there's a different way to approach it?
I don't know if there's a different way to approach it. In my experiences, unfortunately, I have not experienced that yet. I have worked only with ELLs that are Spanish speaking. My time in Southern California was a predominantly Mexican and Mexican American population. And I can imagine, though, that just providing students with extra supports and using tools like Google Translate to be able to communicate, or some other translate tool, so that you can communicate your ideas, but then also using the strategies and the theories to provide that best immersion of English for those students.
Because I know it was easier, well, not easier, seeing growth with English, me communicating with a student, let's say from, East Africa, that spoke a language that I hate to be ashamed to say that I just didn't know. I would try to have them focus on what their life was like and their culture, because it was easier for them to talk about, where they live, about their family, tell me a little bit about their country, foods and things like that. But you could see where there was growth, and it was almost a light up when someone would say, and they were in bad shape because they had to pass a certain test. They had to get gains in the test in order to graduate. And I just remember this one girl, and she said, "That's good. Did I get that right?" And it's harder to, at least for me, to use a lot of the techniques in not teaching for an exam when students have to take one to get into certain programs. And I don't know if that happens like on a college level or the school level. I mean, it seems that they exempt everything now. But I just find it more difficult because I can speak Spanish and I can read, those kind of, Italian, anything that, is a Romance language pretty much. But I just find it different because the syntax is different, the vocabulary can be very different. And it's something I think that not a lot of research has been done on so far. I ruined that, right?
Alejandra, did you want to share something? I saw your
It's a share / question. So I was just thinking about my experience when I was learning English, when I was 16 years old and I learned English. And I remember I was placed I had 3 ESL classes when I was in the ESL program. They were all kids like me who had a different language as a first language. So I had ESL reading, ESL writing, and ESL world history. But then I had math, biology, and PE with the other kids, with the American kids. So, thinking about, I'm trying to maybe imagine why I was placed or what the benefits are of placing someone like me and the other kids in a particularly in this specific world history ESL class versus biology with the rest of the kids. So where we were all integrated. I do understand the reasoning behind the ESL reading and writing because our needs were different. Our vocabulary needs were different. But something like world history, before you give me your perspective, Kim, I have to say that I absolutely loved being in the ESL world history class. I think it was extremely helpful to me. And today I remember that was the class where I learned the word flood, what happens with the Nile River, the word flood, and the word scaffold, like what you use to paint a wall or to clean windows. So I remember, I really enjoyed being in that class and I think it was very useful to me. But what do you think would be the reasoning behind, there being an ESL world history class for kids, kind of pulling the kids outside versus the biology one with everyone mixed together?
The only thing that I can think right now off the top of my head is that world history is a very language heavy subject. You rely a lot on the understanding of language to make meaning of the history, whereas in mathematics, numbers are the same from one subject or one language to the next.
Okay.
Biology is a little bit more mathematical, but not really. So that would be my only thought.
Okay. I mean, that makes sense. That makes sense, actually.
Did you feel that you had more language support in that ESL class?
Oh, definitely. We had vocabulary lists. That's why I remember that. That's where I learned flood and scaffold.
So if you had been put in a regular world history course with other students, they wouldn't have been teaching you what the word flood means.
Right. They would have assumed that
I knew what understood. It was. Yeah.
Right.
So that's the only reason I can think.
So because it was probably language heavy, right? Okay. Well, that makes a lot of sense. I hadn't seen it that way. So thank you for the enlightenment.
Well, thank you, everyone. It's a beautiful day. I hope you guys get a chance to go out and enjoy it. And thank you, Kimberly. I really appreciate it. Enjoyed it very much. I really liked the practical, hands-on kind of tips. It was fantastic. So thank you very much. And we'll see you soon.
Thanks. Hope you can do it again.
Thank you, Kim. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Bye, Erin.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
I should have had them all do a survey, the evaluation, but
Oh, well.
we'll send it in that email.